Before we begin, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the other toast for more stories that hit you right in the soul. Now, imagine this. The moment he posted that photo with her, barefoot in Bali, arms raised to the sky, their matching bracelets glowing in the sunset, I knew it was time. The caption read, "Aligned Souls. New Beginnings." But what he didn't realize was that I'd already written the ending. My name is Claire Dawson. For 15 years, I was his wife. His backbone. His quiet shadow. While Ethan Dawson stood in the spotlight of San Francisco's startup scene, I was behind the curtain, making sure his empire didn't crumble. I was the one who made sure the numbers added up. I was the one who got him his first round of investors. I was the one who believed when no one else did. And for all that loyalty, I got discarded. Replaced. Like I was just the prelude to a better love story. But Ethan forgot something. Before I was Mrs. Dawson, I was Claire Morgan. Youngest lead forensic analyst at Harlan Price and Associates. The woman who built her career uncovering corporate fraud so complex it made headlines. The woman who once traced 23 shell companies to one bank account in Zurich, all while planning a wedding. And for the past 8 months, I've been planning again. It started with the late-night texts. The ones he sent while sitting right next to me on the couch. "Can't wait to feel your energy again," he wrote. "You're my grounding force." I wasn't the grounding force. That was Luna Hart, the spiritual influencer with 300,000 followers and a portfolio of vague lifestyle coaching packages. I followed her. Quietly. Watched her rise. Watched her post selfies from our beach house. Watched her model gifted to jewelry that matched the missing thousands from our company's marketing budget. I didn't say a word. I just opened a new spreadsheet. I documented every business retreat that happened to align with her full moon circles. Every 5-figure charge labeled as consulting on our ledger that ended up on her Instagram as another manifestation getaway. I cross-referenced Ethan's calendar with hers. Mapped it. Drew it. Layered it with corporate statements. Then I called Mark Chin. Mark hadn't heard from me in years, but we were good once, rising stars in the same firm, thick as thieves. When I sent him my files, he didn't even ask how I got them. He just called back and said, "Tell me when to move." Rachel Lee was next. My roommate from college, now a partner at a high-tier law firm with friends in powerful places. She didn't blink when I handed her my plan. Just opened a bottle of wine and said, "Let's sharpen the knives." And sharpen them, we did. Ethan, meanwhile, grew bolder. He started leaving Soul Journey books on our nightstand. Suggested I find a hobby, maybe join a women's circle. He talked about dissolving our marital assets to simplify energy flow. Claimed he wanted to untether and release, with love and grace. I almost laughed in his face. He didn't know the trust fund his father left him. I helped structure that. He didn't know that when he signed the paperwork to streamline the shares of his company into his name, I kept legal power of attorney over several of the holdings. All documented. All witnessed. All airtight. Ethan didn't know that the startup he founded, Vital Core, was co-founded by me under a separate legal shell that I never dissolved. Because why would I? He never looked. He was too busy chasing enlightenment in Costa Rica while billing our investors for breathwork intensives. The moment he booked the 4 seasons in Bali with company funds under client acquisition, I filed the first notice with the SEC, anonymously, of course. The moment Luna posted that energy alignment package, thanking Vital Core for their generous retreat sponsorship, I sent the invoice to Rachel. Labeled. Highlighted. Time-stamped. We waited. And then, 2 nights ago, As Ethan stood barefoot on a hilltop declaring his engagement to Luna under the full moon, I signed the papers that would trigger a legal, financial, and reputational earthquake. The countdown began. What Ethan didn't understand, what men like him never understand, is that the softest silence always hides the deepest storm. I spent 15 years building the perfect wife persona. The quiet partner. The grateful supporter. The one who stayed home and made everything look effortless. He thought I disappeared into that role. He thought I forgot who I was before him. He was wrong. This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's not even just about justice. This is about what happens when the woman you underestimated builds the roadmap to your downfall with your own receipts. And Ethan. He left the keys to the kingdom right in my hand. Tomorrow, I walk into the boardroom as the majority shareholder of Vital Core. He'll be barefoot. I'll be in heels. And by the time he realizes what's happening, his empire will be gone. Chapter 1 closes with Claire standing alone in her home office, the sun rising behind the San Francisco skyline, every document printed, signed, and ready. Her hand rests gently on the red file folder marked, for delivery, 9 a.m. Her phone buzzes one last time. A message from Ethan. Miss you. Can't wait to come home to your energy. Claire smiles. See you in court, she whispers. Claire Dawson arrives at Vital Core headquarters at precisely 8:54 a.m. The morning fog clings to the glass facade like it's reluctant to let go of yesterday's illusions. She steps out of the sleek black sedan Rachel arranged, courtesy of a firm that also represents 3 of Vital Core's largest shareholders, and adjusts the collar of her ivory wool coat. Underneath, she wears a deep emerald suit tailored sharp enough to cut steel. Ethan always said it was his favorite color on her. Today, she wears it for war. Security waves her through. They always do. Her name is still on the founding documents of the parent company. No one ever thought to revoke access because no one ever thought she would return. But she's not here to visit. Claire walks past the marble reception desk, heels clicking like clockwork. Behind her, the lobby screen shows a promotional loop of Ethan on stage at a retreat in Mexico, speaking about conscious capitalism and leading with divine balance. The irony doesn't escape her. As she waits for the elevator, her phone buzzes. Rachel, all clear. SEC teams in place. Mark says the audit hits in T-52 minutes. Claire, good. Legal envelope delivered. Rachel, signed, sealed, and on his desk. The look on his assistant's face. Worth framing. The elevator dings. Claire steps inside. By the time the doors open onto the executive floor, her pulse is steady. Her breath is calm. She has imagined this moment for months. Ethan is in the corner office. Of course he is. He made it his sanctum, filled it with Himalayan salt lamps, artisanal incense burners, and floor cushions no one else was allowed to touch. The floor outside his door smells faintly of Palo Santo and delusion. Claire walks past the startled executive assistant, who scrambles to intercept. He's in a meeting, I can. Claire doesn't slow down. She pushes the door open. Ethan is barefoot, in linen pants, standing in front of a whiteboard covered with energy flow maps. His chief strategy officer sits across from him, confused. They both look up at Claire like she's an apparition. For a moment, Ethan can't speak. Claire. I see you're still not wearing shoes in meetings, she says, calm as rain. That's okay. I brought plenty of documentation to keep you grounded. She places the envelope on the table. Thick. Heavy. What is this? He asks, voice a notch higher than it was a second ago. Your first real lesson in asset management, she replies. And a notice of emergency governance activation. Ethan blinks. What? You signed it, remember? The clause you didn't read in the restructuring paperwork I filed 2 years ago. The one giving me majority voting rights in the event of ethical violations or pending federal investigation. The CSO's face goes pale. Ethan laughs, nervously. There's no investigation. Claire doesn't respond. She taps her phone. On cue, Mark's email arrives. She turns the screen toward Ethan. His own name lights up under the subject line. Preliminary Inquiry, SEC Review of Vital Core Financial Practices. This is a mistake, he says, already sweating. You're not qualified to. I built this company with you. I was there before Luna. Before the retreats. Before you charged your first breathwork session to the investor account. Her voice doesn't rise. It doesn't need to. It cuts like precision steel. And unlike your soulmate, I have an MBA, a CPA, and an entire legal team behind me. The CSO clears his throat. Claire, if there's something we need to know. There's plenty you need to know, she says, setting a flash drive on the table. You'll find the details of every unauthorized transaction, every false invoice submitted under Luna Hart's name, and a dozen shell LLCs billed as strategic partners. Ethan shakes his head. You can't do this. I already have. The next meeting begins in 10 minutes. An emergency board session she called at 6 a.m. this morning. Legal advisors, financial analysts, and key stakeholders, all of whom received anonymous briefings over the past 3 weeks, will be there. And Claire will sit at the head of the table. She leaves Ethan standing in his office, stunned, silent, staring at the envelope like it's a bomb, which it is. The boardroom is glass-walled, minimal, and silent as she enters. One by one, members arrive. Some look confused. Others wary. A few exchange quiet nods with her. She places the file folders in front of each seat. Slides the flash drive into the port. Connects her laptop to the central screen. And waits. At 9:15 a.m., Ethan stumbles in. Gone is the spiritual leader persona. He looks like a man dragged out of a fever dream into a blinding, sober reality. What's going on here? He demands. Claire doesn't answer. Instead, she begins. A full presentation of Vital Core's financial violations, complete with timelines, signatures, screenshots, and audio clips. The room stays silent. Except for the sound of Ethan's carefully curated image shattering piece by piece. Your mistress billed over $200,000 for chakra alignment sessions and divine client whispering. Do you know what that is? She asks the room. No one answers. I looked it up, Claire says, deadpan. It's literally just whispering. A ripple of disbelief moves through the boardroom. And as for the funds transferred to Luna's consulting firm, which, by the way, isn't even legally registered in the state of California, I've included documentation of the exact dates they coincided with your wellness retreats. Ethan moves to stand. Sit down, Claire says. He does. Not because she raised her voice, but because everyone else in the room is already looking at her. By the time the board votes, it's unanimous. Ethan is suspended, pending the outcome of the investigation. Claire is appointed interim CEO, with full decision-making authority. When the vote is recorded, Claire stands, gathers her folders, and meets Ethan's eye one last time. This is what accountability looks like, she says. As she exits the boardroom, the hallway outside buzzes with the first wave of press alerts. The headlines have started. Her phone buzzes. Rachel, stock dropped 8% after the leak. More to come. Mark, SEC audit officially triggered. Claire, good. Let it burn clean. She walks out of VitalCore's executive suite not as a visitor, not as a wife, but as the woman in charge. And this? This was just phase 1. Claire didn't sleep that night. Not because of nerves, those were long gone, but because of logistics. Timing. Precision. She sat in the presidential suite at the Four Seasons, the one Ethan had originally booked for his engagement weekend with Luna. The same suite he had once whispered about using to start a new chapter of abundance. Now it was hers. Not symbolically. Legally. Because Claire had paid for it. With her money. Through her holding company. Using a credit line Ethan never knew she had. And Luna. Luna was about to discover that manifesting a luxury lifestyle on someone else's stolen funds had consequences. It was just past 7 a.m. when Claire's private inbox chimed. Subject, confidential, client report, Hart Consulting LLC. From, forensic team, Chen and Associates. She opened the file. There it was. Every transaction Ethan tried to hide. Every wire transfer made to Hart Consulting. Each invoice labeled with absurd service names, emotional rebalancing, infinity alignment, archetypal shadow decoding. Claire nearly laughed. But she didn't. She had cried once. Screamed once. That was 8 months ago. Since then, all emotion had been redirected into one thing, evidence. Rachel arrived an hour later, carrying 2 lattes and a copy of the San Francisco Chronicle. Front page, she said, tossing the paper onto the bed. Claire glanced at the headline. VitalCore rocked by fraud allegations, CEO suspended amid claims of fake consulting scheme. Beneath it, a subhead. Sources confirm SEC and DOJ launching parallel investigations. The photo was of Ethan walking to his car the night before, avoiding cameras, his face half-shadowed and deeply panicked. Claire sipped her coffee. Luna still hasn't posted anything, Rachel said, scrolling her phone. Which is weird, because 2 days ago she couldn't stop uploading moon rituals and champagne baths. She's getting scared, Claire said. The last withdrawal she made was yesterday morning. $5,000. From a corporate account. That's enough for a flight, Rachel mused. She won't get far. I've frozen everything. At 10:34 a.m., Claire got the confirmation text from Diana Alvarez at the SEC. Your tip led to verified discrepancies. Full review underway. DOJ looped in ****. They were moving faster than expected. Claire liked that. She opened Luna's Instagram again. Still nothing. But her location tag from 2 days ago was still active. Napa. Claire tapped on it. The picture, Luna in a silk robe, sipping champagne under a canopy of fairy lights. Caption, grateful for the abundance flowing through me. VitalCore believes in energetic prosperity. Claire sent the screenshot to Rachel. Ready the delivery, she said. Rachel grinned. 30 minutes later, a courier knocked on the door of Luna's hillside rental villa. He delivered an envelope marked urgent, legal. Inside were 3 things. 1. A formal cease and desist letter regarding the use of VitalCore branding. 2. A subpoena for Luna to appear in an initial deposition regarding corporate fraud. 3. A letter from the DOJ requesting documentation of her services and business licensure. Luna's reaction arrived via Instagram story. Not a video, just a black screen with white text. Please respect my privacy during this transitional time. I am focusing on healing. Claire rolled her eyes. She's going to try to play the victim, Rachel muttered. Cry on a podcast. Say she was misled. That's fine, Claire said. She can cry all she wants. The tears won't unsend the invoices. At 2 p.m., Claire met with Diana at the SEC's San Francisco office. The team was already unpacking VitalCore's financials. Claire handed over a thick folder. "These," she said, "are emails between Ethan and Luna, where he explains how to file expenses through the dummy consulting firm. She even brags about it. Said she was finally being paid to be herself." Diana didn't smile. But she nodded. At 4:15 p.m., Claire received another update. Hart Consulting LLC, flagged for audit by California Department of Consumer Affairs. At 5:03 p.m., another ping. Department of Justice has confirmed formal interest in opening a case. Claire stood by the window of her suite, watching the sun dip over the Bay Bridge, and for the first time in a long time, she let herself feel something other than strategy. Not joy. Not relief. But power. The kind she had always been told to relinquish. For the sake of peace. For the sake of love. For the sake of his ego. Those days were over. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered. "Claire," Luna's voice said, trembling. Claire didn't say anything. "I didn't know. I mean, not everything. Ethan told me it was all legit. He said the paperwork was just formality. That you weren't involved anymore." "I'm sure that's what he said," Claire replied, cool as marble. I can help. I have emails. Screenshots. I can give them to you. If you can talk to your people. Make this go away." Claire waited a beat. Then another. "Send everything," she said. "Every file, every voice note, every bank record. And maybe, your lawyer can negotiate cooperation instead of prosecution." Luna started to cry. Claire ended the call. The moment it disconnected, her inbox began to flood. Dozens of files. Screenshots. Videos. Invoices. And one audio file of Ethan's voice. "Don't worry about Claire," he said. "She's harmless. She likes to play CEO, but she's soft. She needs me." Claire saved it. Labeled it, hubris.wave. She forwarded it to Rachel, Mark, and Diana. At 7:48 p.m., Ethan called. She didn't answer. He called again. She didn't answer. At 9:13 p.m., he sent a text. "You don't understand what you've done. You're destroying everything, asterisk asterisk." At 9:17 p.m., she replied. "Correction, I'm dismantling what you stole." She put her phone down and poured a glass of wine. Outside, the city sparkled with headlines and subpoenas. And somewhere, Ethan was realizing that his spiritual awakening had just become a legal reckoning. Claire closed her laptop for the night. Tomorrow, she would start reclaiming the trust fund. And the family name he never deserved. But tonight, she would rest. Not because the battle was over, but because she was winning. The morning light filtered softly through the penthouse suite's linen curtains, but there was nothing soft about Claire's mood. It was day 3. 3 days since Ethan was suspended. 3 days since Luna received the subpoena. 3 days since Claire pulled the thread that began to unravel a carefully constructed web of lies, fraud, and betrayal. She stood at the edge of the window, coffee in hand, as the city below woke up to news of VitalCore's internal collapse. And it was far from over. Her phone buzzed. "Rachel, just got off with Diana. DOJ wants a formal testimony. They're moving forward." Claire didn't respond immediately. She just smiled. This wasn't vengeance. This was strategy. Clean. Cold. Controlled. She opened her inbox. 48 new messages. Most were from lawyers, journalists, or board members now ready to distance themselves from Ethan and align themselves with the woman who saved the company. But one subject line stood out. Urgent, Ethan Wilson, legal notice of emergency restraining request. She opened it. Her breath caught, not from fear, but from sheer disbelief. Ethan was filing an emergency injunction. He was trying to claim that Claire's actions were retaliatory, emotionally motivated, and potentially unhinged. He accused her of targeted harassment and unauthorized access to privileged information. He'd attached a statement from Luna claiming she was coerced into sharing private files. Claire laughed, actually laughed, for the first time in months. And then she forwarded it to Rachel. 5 seconds later, her phone rang. Rachel's voice crackled with fury. He really has no idea what's coming, does he? He thinks a desperate counterattack will buy him time, Claire replied, calm. He doesn't realize I already own the battlefield. She forwarded 21 files, texts, emails, financial documents, and a video of Ethan himself coaching Luna on what to call her consulting sessions. Rachel began drafting the counter-filing immediately. Meanwhile, Claire called Mark. Find me everything with his name, her name, and the trust fund, she said. Mark's voice sharpened. You think he used family money? I know he did, Claire said. I just need to prove it. 2 hours later, the proof arrived. Claire sat in front of her laptop, eyes locked on a series of transaction screenshots. Ethan had transferred money from his family trust, money meant to support his siblings, nieces, and aging parents, into shell corporations that paid Luna's business. There were invoices labeled Retreat Expansion and Energy Space Design from Hart Consulting, paid using accounts originating from Dawson Family Holdings. And then came the jackpot. An internal memo Ethan wrote to himself. A draft email to his brother. I'll return it before the auditors notice. Claire's not even aware of these holdings anymore. She hasn't looked in years. She's busy with her little home projects. Claire's hands curled into fists. Her little home projects. She was raising his company. Holding together their house. Carrying the weight of his reputation while he slipped away into candles and whispers and luxury he didn't earn. She opened a new email and began typing. To Audrey Dawson, Ethan's sister, now trustee of the family fund. Subject, you deserve to know. She attached every document. 10 minutes later, her phone rang. Audrey. She answered. Claire. Audrey's voice was quiet. Steady. I always knew he was reckless, but this. I'm sorry, Claire said. No, Audrey cut her off. Don't be. You just saved us from losing everything. I'm calling an emergency trustee meeting. Today. By midday, Ethan was officially under review by the trust's legal committee. By evening, Claire received a second email. This time, from a major publication. Subject, feature request, financial guardian of Vital Core. They wanted to profile her. Frame her not as the angry wife, but the resilient strategist who rescued a crumbling company from spiritual nonsense and fiscal disaster. She didn't say yes. Not yet. Instead, she changed out of her silk blouse, into a plain hoodie, pulled her hair into a bun, and walked into the office of Dawson and Dawson Legal, the family firm that once proudly displayed Ethan's photo on their homepage. He wasn't there now. Claire walked into the private conference room where his parents, his sister, and the 2 remaining trustees were waiting. Every eye turned to her. Claire, his mother said slowly. We're embarrassed. And grateful. I didn't come for thanks, Claire said. I came for clarity. She presented a simple, straightforward timeline. Receipts. Memos. Transfers. Every single dollar traced. Every lie exposed. He told us the firm was paying her, his mother whispered, shaking her head. They were, Claire said. But only because he paid himself to pay her. Silence fell like a stone in water. Then Audrey stood. We're freezing his access. Effective immediately. And we want you to help us protect the rest. Claire nodded. As she walked out of the law office and back into the cool San Francisco night, her phone vibrated again. Ethan. Text, this is war. She stared at it. Deleted it. And sent a different message. To Rachel. We need to move to phase 4. Rachel, already drafting it. Claire climbed into the back seat of the waiting car, exhaled, and stared at the skyline. He thought she was playing defense. He had no idea she was already 10 moves ahead. And the next one would silence him, for good. The next morning, Claire arrived at the Vitalcore campus before anyone else. The sun had barely risen, casting golden lines through the towering lobby windows. The only sounds were her footsteps echoing against polished marble and the low hum of the lights powering on. Today would be the day Ethan Dawson disappeared from the company he thought he built alone. She headed straight to the executive floor, greeted only by the early shift security officer, who now gave her a respectful nod instead of the skeptical glances from a week ago. Word had spread. Things were shifting. She entered the boardroom where her allies were already waiting, Rachel, with 2 thick folders under her arm, Mark, on a secure laptop in video call, and 2 senior board members who had watched the entire storm unfold. They were here for the final vote. The one that would officially sever Ethan from Vitalcore. Permanently. Claire laid out the timeline on the central screen. Her voice steady, confident. Over the last 6 days, she began, Vitalcore has been named in 3 federal inquiries, 2 state-level audits, and 1 preliminary fraud investigation connected directly to its former CEO, Ethan Dawson. Former, one board member muttered under his breath. Feels good to hear it aloud. Claire continued. In addition to the misappropriation of funds, unauthorized branding partnerships, and misuse of company credit lines for personal expenditures, Mr. Dawson has continued to contact employees off-record and has now attempted to secure private financing using Vitalcore's name, without board consent. Rachel passed documents around the table. He's trying to create a shadow version of the company, Rachel said flatly. With Luna at the helm. Calling it Corelight. Mark chimed in from the screen. And he's already approached 3 of our investors. We have email logs and call records. He's violating at least 4 clauses in his contract and 3 state laws. The room fell quiet as Claire played the final piece of evidence, a voicemail Ethan left for one of the junior developers, offering him a spiritual promotion and double pay to join his new venture in Bali. You'll get stock options in something bigger than any corporate entity, he said on the tape. This is the next evolution of capitalism. You won't need salary. You'll be in energetic flow. Someone snorted. Claire didn't look up. She let the silence carry the weight. Then she handed out the final motion to vote. One by one, the board members signed. The last signature came from the original investor who had once believed in Ethan. Now, his name trembled on the paper. Motion passed, Ethan Dawson was removed as founder, CEO, and all executive titles. Effective immediately. Security would revoke access. The IT team would purge credentials. HR would issue the final legal notice. Every trace of his name in the leadership roster would be deleted from the company website, databases, and branding within the hour. At 10:07 a.m., Claire sent a one-word message to the internal communications team. Execute. At 10:10 a.m., she sent a text to the one person who hadn't spoken to her since the storm started, Ethan's assistant, Maya. You have 10 minutes to decide which direction your career is going. Vital Core is moving forward ***. The reply came in 2 minutes later. I'm in. I've seen everything. I'm done protecting him ***. Claire forwarded her immunity paperwork to Rachel for internal HR protection. Then she stood. The boardroom emptied. But Claire remained. She stared out the tall glass window as her phone began to buzz, notifications, media requests, messages from investors who were suddenly eager to meet the woman behind the rescue. She ignored them all. Instead, she opened the security feed. Camera 4, lobby. Ethan was standing at the front desk, yelling at security. Claire turned up the audio. I'm the founder of this company, he barked, voice cracking. You can't lock me out. I'm sorry, Mr. Dawson, the guard replied calmly. Your badge was deactivated this morning. My office, my files, my laptop is on the 14th floor. All items have been boxed and sent to legal. You no longer have access. He turned, fuming. Call Claire. Tell her she's making a huge mistake. Claire turned off the feed. She didn't need to hear the rest. Instead, she pulled out a key. One she had kept for 15 years. A small silver key labeled Archive. Downstairs, 3 levels below the main lobby, a secure room held every company contract, every founder memo, every original draft of what Vital Core was meant to be. She opened the drawer labeled Dawson/Claire, co-founder materials. Inside were 3 folders. One labeled Initial Vision. One labeled Claire's Drafts. And one, Ethan's folder, was empty. She closed the drawer. Walked away. And never looked back. At 11:42 a.m., she received a final message from Ethan. I hope you're happy. You've destroyed everything we had ***. She replied only once. What we had was a lie. I've only destroyed the illusion. The truth was always waiting. And now, so am I ***. She locked her phone. The next chapter of Vital Core, and her life, had officially begun. Claire never believed in omens. But even she paused when she stepped into the elevator of the federal courthouse that morning, and the screen above her flickered, then went black. Briefly. A blink. A glitch. Then it lit back up. Floor 17. Department of Justice. She adjusted the lapel of her charcoal blazer, stepped out, and nodded politely at the receptionist behind the bulletproof glass. I'm here for my appointment with Agent Alvarez, she said. Room B. She's expecting you. Claire had never walked into a federal meeting alone before. Not because she couldn't, but because for most of her career, she had always been the one behind the scenes, pulling numbers, crafting narratives, sharpening legal strategies so someone else could win the war. Not anymore. This time, she was the client. The whistleblower. The woman who broke open one of the most calculated fraud schemes buried under the illusion of incense, breathwork, and self-proclaimed spiritual alignment. Luna Hart had once whispered to the moon about her rising power. Claire was about to speak to the Department of Justice about Luna's prison sentence. Agent Diana Alvarez rose from her seat as Claire entered the room. Ms. Dawson, she greeted with a thin, confident smile. Claire responded with the same tone. Please. Just Claire. They shook hands. The room was clean, cold, professional. A table with a notepad. A sealed water bottle. A voice recorder already running. Deanna gestured to the chair across from her. We received the last batch of documentation last night. Your assistant, Rachel Lee, submitted a detailed packet on the Hart Consulting accounts. The timeline is damning. Claire nodded. She wasn't just the face, she said. Luna knew everything. She made up the invoices. She listed the fake services. She even asked Ethan for examples of credible-sounding business buzzwords so she could make the descriptions more convincing. She gave us a statement yesterday, Diana said. Her lawyer's negotiating a deal. Claire raised an eyebrow. How generous of her. Her cooperation's helpful, but your files, your structure, your cross-referencing, that's the backbone. It's what gives us real traction. Diana pushed a thick folder across the table. Claire, if you agree to testify, this won't just be a financial investigation. This becomes a federal wire fraud case. Possibly even a conspiracy charge. Claire didn't hesitate. I'll testify, she said. I'll walk the jury through every fake contract. Every double entry. Every whispered scam. Diana nodded. That's what I was hoping to hear. Claire left the meeting an hour later with an iron resolve. Ethan and Luna had tried to build a kingdom on stolen trust and spiritual buzzwords. Now they would see what it meant to face a woman who didn't just build empires, she audited them. By the time she reached the car, Rachel was calling. They froze Luna's passport, Rachel said. She tried to book a flight to Costa Rica. Got flagged at the system level. Good, Claire replied. And Ethan? He's moved into the old apartment downtown. The one you both used to laugh about. 3 blocks from his old college. Claire couldn't stop the brief wave of emotion. Not pity. Not nostalgia. Just a strange sense of symmetry. The man who thought he had outgrown everything, now shrinking back into the place he once swore he'd never return to. Let him sit in that echo, Claire said softly. She spent the afternoon combing through the last threads of her evidence bank. Receipts for holistic luxury items. Coaching packages. Goddess retreats billed to corporate cards. All of it preserved. But there was one piece she hadn't opened yet. A recording Luna had sent in a panic, just days after the subpoenas landed. She pressed play. Ethan's voice filled the room. She thinks she's so smart. But she wouldn't be anywhere without me. I gave her everything. She stayed home. Spent my money. She should be grateful I even let her keep the house. Claire's lips tightened. She downloaded the file. Labeled it, Final Nail. Later that night, a different message arrived. From Ethan himself. He had avoided direct contact for 2 days. But now, desperation leaked through every line. Claire. Please. I'm being destroyed. Everything's gone. Luna's turned on me. The press won't leave me alone. My family won't return my calls. My lawyer quit. I don't even have access to my health insurance, ***. I know you're behind this. You always were smart. Too smart. But this is cruel, ***. Claire stared at the message for a long time. Then replied. I'm not behind this. I'm in front of it. And what you're feeling. That's not cruelty. It's consequences, ***. She put her phone down. Opened her laptop. And uploaded every final document to a shared federal database. 3 more agencies were now involved. The Department of Labor. The California Attorney General's Office. And the Internal Revenue Service. She didn't need revenge. She needed records. Claire Dawson, the quiet wife in the background, was now the central witness in one of the most high-profile corporate investigations in the state. And the next time she'd see Ethan, he wouldn't be barefoot in a retreat. He'd be sitting across from a federal attorney, wearing a suit that didn't fit. And for the first time in his life, he would finally be forced to listen. Claire sat in the front row of the courtroom, perfectly composed in a navy dress suit, hair pinned back, expression unreadable. Behind her, a dozen journalists tapped away at tablets and phones. The room buzzed with tension, not the kind that screams, but the kind that tightens your chest. Every breath held, every whisper silenced the moment the judge entered. The United States versus Ethan Dawson. A trial that had started as a corporate audit had ballooned into a full-scale fraud case. The accusations were no longer just whispers. They were federal charges. Wire fraud. Conspiracy to commit corporate theft. Misuse of investor funds. Failure to disclose conflict of interest. Claire had heard the words so many times, they no longer sounded like daggers. They sounded like closure. Ethan sat 2 rows ahead at the defense table, flanked by a public defender. His new lawyer wasn't seasoned. He wasn't expensive. He was assigned. And judging by his grim expression, even he knew this case wasn't going to end in mercy. Ethan looked smaller than she remembered. Pale. Shoulders hunched. No linen robes. No bracelets. No spiritual glow. Just a man cornered by truth and left with no mantras to escape it. He hadn't made eye contact with her once. But she felt him glance sideways every time the prosecution pulled up a new document, each one submitted by Claire. The prosecutor was methodical. This is Exhibit F, a wire transfer of $80,000 to Hart Consulting LLC, labeled as Market Expansion. The screen changed. This is an Instagram post, same day, showing Luna Hart in a private suite at the Royal Bali Resort, tagged, feeling aligned. Thanks to my king and vital core. Chuckles rippled through the room. Ethan flinched. Claire didn't. The prosecutor moved on. This email chain, dated March 3rd, between Mr. Dawson and Ms. Hart, contains direct instructions on how to create false invoices for energetic strategy alignment and chakra brand immersion. He turned to the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, let me be clear, these are not industry terms. These are fabrications. Language designed to make theft sound poetic. Claire could feel the shift in the room. The jury's posture changed. The press leaned forward. Even the judge scribbled something down. Then came the audio recordings. Ethan's voice, calm and arrogant, filled the courtroom. I've built enough goodwill. Claire's still loyal. She won't fight back. She doesn't have it in her. And another. She's not going to dig into the accounts. She hasn't even looked at the company finances in over a year. She's just glad the bills are paid. Claire didn't blink. The defense lawyer stood and tried to object, citing emotional manipulation. Overruled. The prosecutor called his next witness, Claire Dawson. As she walked toward the stand, the silence was thunderous. Her heels clicked on the tile like a gavel falling. Under oath, she testified. Calmly. Precisely. She walked the courtroom through the spreadsheet she'd built, the timelines she'd constructed, the shell companies she'd traced. She explained what each number meant, what each email confirmed, how each financial line item was engineered to bypass detection. At one point, the prosecutor held up her final report. Ms. Dawson, is it true that this document has now been used by the DOJ, the IRS, the SEC, and the California Attorney General's office as the foundation for ongoing investigations? Yes, Claire answered. That was the goal. And why did you do it? Claire looked straight at the jury. Because truth doesn't speak for itself. You have to show it. You have to prove it. Even when it hurts. Ethan's lawyer didn't cross-examine her. He didn't dare. After her testimony, the judge called for recess. Claire stepped down from the witness box and walked past Ethan. He didn't speak. Didn't move. but she heard his breathing stutter. Later that day, the prosecution played one last piece of evidence. An email Luna had tried to delete, recovered from a backup server. Subject: she knows. I think she's watching us, ***. Ethan's reply: let her watch. She won't do anything. She never does, ***. The courtroom froze. That was the moment everyone realized, Ethan wasn't just guilty. He was arrogant. And he underestimated the wrong woman. As court adjourned for the day, Claire stepped out into the late afternoon sun. Reporters swarmed the sidewalk, flashing cameras and shouting questions. She said nothing. She didn't need to. By tomorrow morning, the verdict would begin to take shape. And the world would finally see not the man Ethan pretended to be, but the woman who dismantled him piece by piece. Not out of rage, but out of reason. Out of brilliance. Out of unstoppable, undeniable clarity. And justice, not revenge, was now within reach. The headlines arrived before the verdict. Before the jury had even filed back into their room for deliberation, Claire's name was everywhere. But this time, it wasn't tethered to Ethan's. It stood alone. Claire Dawson, the woman who brought down Silicon Valley's spiritual swindler. Vitalcore's quiet co-founder speaks, and the courts are listening. From shadow to spotlight, Claire Dawson breaks her silence, breaks the case. She never sought the attention. But she had learned to use it. Because visibility wasn't vanity, it was armor. That evening, Claire was interviewed by the Financial Times for a profile. She declined video, requested anonymity until the trial ended, and spoke only in facts. No emotions. No embellishments. Just truth. He underestimated you, the reporter said before they left. Claire smiled politely. They usually do. That night, she stayed at the penthouse suite overlooking San Francisco, not the same one Ethan had reserved for Luna, but a new one. One she chose herself. One that didn't carry echoes of betrayal. As the city lights flickered below, Claire stood barefoot on the balcony, a glass of wine in hand, and watched the fog roll in. The air felt different. Lighter. Not free, not yet, but close. Her phone buzzed. Rachel, verdict tomorrow. Prosecution says they're confident. Claire, I don't need confident. I need thorough. Rachel, that too. Claire set the phone down and opened her laptop. She wasn't done. There were still loose ends. And one of them was the press narrative. She began drafting a statement, not for sympathy, not for pity, but for truth. A declaration of who she was before Ethan tried to shrink her. She didn't send it. Not yet. Just saved it in a folder titled Post-Verdict. At 8:13 a.m. the next day, the call came. Rachel's voice was steady. Jury's in. They reached a decision. Claire didn't ask what it was. She got dressed in silence. Black suit. No jewelry. Hair pulled back. She wore the same shoes she had on the day she first testified. By 9:02 a.m., she was seated again in the courtroom. Ethan was already there. He looked even thinner. Pale. A man whose spiritual masks had been stripped until only bone remained. His lawyer whispered to him, but Ethan didn't respond. His eyes were locked on the jury. Claire kept hers on the judge. All rise, the clerk called. The jury foreperson stood. The judge asked the question. Has the jury reached a unanimous verdict? Yes, Your Honor. Claire folded her hands. The foreperson cleared her throat. On the charge of wire fraud, guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit corporate theft, guilty. On the charge of misuse of investor funds, guilty. Claire didn't move. Didn't cry. She simply exhaled. A slow, measured release, like a valve finally turned after holding pressure too long. The courtroom remained still. The judge nodded. Sentencing will be set for next month. The defendant is remanded to custody. Ethan stood, unsteady. For a moment, he looked around, as if expecting someone, anyone, to reach for him. No one did. Even Luna wasn't there. Her legal team had already cut a separate deal. She was reportedly cooperating with 3 investigations and had moved back in with her parents in New Mexico. Ethan tried to speak to the judge. I was misled. She tricked me. I thought it was spiritual consulting. Mr. Dawson, the judge said sharply, you're not permitted to speak. Your time for that has passed. Security stepped forward. Ethan looked over his shoulder. His eyes met Claire's. It was the first time he'd looked directly at her since the day she walked out of his life and into his empire. There was no plea in his gaze. No apology. Just confusion. Because even now, he didn't understand how this happened. Claire held his gaze. Not with cruelty. With clarity. Because she didn't destroy him. He did. She simply revealed it. After court adjourned, Claire stepped outside. The sky was overcast, soft gray clouds drifting across the bay. A reporter ran up beside her. Claire, do you have any statement? She paused. Looked straight into the lens. And spoke evenly. This was never about revenge. It was about accountability. I didn't expose Ethan Dawson because he betrayed me. I exposed him because he betrayed everyone who believed in him. Then she walked away. The clip aired that evening on every major network. It was quoted. Shared. Reposted with hashtags like #TheRealCEO and #Claire Dawson did not come to play. By midnight, her inbox was flooded with offers, interviews, book deals, speaking invitations, podcasts. She replied to none. Not yet. Instead, she sent one email. To the original Vital Core founding team. A quiet, concise message. We build something better now. Something real. You in? ***. The replies came quickly. Every single one said yes. And Claire Dawson, once the silent wife in the background, now stood at the center of a new beginning. Not forged by fire. But by truth. And she was just getting started. Weeks passed. Ethan Dawson's name disappeared from headlines just as quickly as it had dominated them. The media moved on to fresher scandals, younger flames, and newer chaos. But in courtrooms and government buildings, the echo of his downfall still lived, in files, in transcripts, in sentencing schedules carved into stone calendars. Claire had not attended his sentencing. She didn't need to. She already knew the outcome before it happened. 7 years in federal prison. No parole until year 4. No early release programs approved. And Luna. She was granted immunity in exchange for full cooperation, a deal Claire didn't protest. Let the world see Luna as a cautionary tale. A warning, not a villain. That was justice enough. But Ethan. He would sit behind concrete walls and metal bars, with no incense, no crystals, no curated lighting to blur his reflection. Only time. Time to read the documents he once ignored. Time to remember the wife he dismissed, underestimating her every quiet movement. Meanwhile, Claire had built something new. Vital Core had been reborn under her direction. Gone were the abstract promises of energetic balance. In their place, practical tools for mental health, workplace wellness, and accessible therapy tech. She rewrote the company's mission and made it real. Investors returned. Clients stayed. Stock rose. And Claire. She didn't give speeches about resilience. She proved it. One quiet decision at a time. One precise restructure after another. But it wasn't until she received the letter that she allowed herself to revisit the last thread still left untied. It came in a plain envelope. No return address. No fanfare. Just his name, signed on the bottom right corner. Claire. I've had time to think. Too much of it, maybe. I know you don't owe me anything, not even your time to read this. But if you do, then know that I see it now. All of it. What I did. What I failed to see. Who I became. And what I lost, ***. They say karma is real. But I think karma wore heels, carried spreadsheets, and answered to the name I once took for granted, ***. You were never the quiet one. I was just too loud to hear you, ***. I hope someday you find peace. Because you gave me a punishment far worse than prison. You gave me silence. And that silence says everything, ***. Ethan. She read the letter once. Then again. Then folded it neatly, placed it in her bottom drawer, not to keep him close, but to remind herself how far she had come. Claire didn't reply. She didn't need to. Instead, she sat down at her desk, opened her calendar, and reviewed the final details for the public relaunch event of the newly rebranded company. Verisoul. That was the new name. A nod to truth. A rejection of illusion. The press release was ready. The board approved the campaign. And tomorrow, Claire Dawson would step onto the stage for the first time, not as someone's wife, not as someone's cautionary tale, but as herself. The architect. The strategist. The phoenix. The woman who didn't just rise from the ashes, she learned who set the fire. And built something that couldn't burn again. The phone buzzed once more before midnight. Rachel, the numbers are in. We're profitable. 6 months ahead of projection. Claire stared out the window, a quiet smile brushing her lips. Outside, the city pulsed with light and motion. But inside was peace. A hard-earned peace. The kind that doesn't need to shout. The kind that doesn't need validation. Because when justice has been served, when truth has been spoken, when your silence has thundered louder than their arrogance ever did, you don't need applause. You just keep walking forward. Into the life they said you'd never have. Into the power they never thought you'd claim. And into the future you built, not to prove them wrong. But to prove to yourself that you were never meant to be behind them. You were always meant to lead. The auditorium was silent. Hundreds of guests seated before the stage, press in the back row, cameras humming, flashes poised. The new Verisoul logo glowed behind the podium in clean white and sapphire hues, modern, real, grounded. Claire Dawson stepped into the light. It wasn't her first public appearance since the trial. But it was the first time she allowed her story to unfold without filters. Without legalese. Without deflection. This was her stage now. She stood with calm precision, black suit sharp, hair soft but pulled back. Her posture radiated quiet power. 3 years ago, she began, I was introduced at conferences as the wife of Vitalcore's visionary. Today, I stand before you as Verisoul's CEO. Polite applause. Claire let the pause hold. Then. And the only reason I'm standing here is because I stopped waiting to be given a voice. I started using it. Now the applause deepened. She continued. For years, I supported a company behind closed doors. I balanced its budgets, shielded its weaknesses, and cleaned up its messes. All while someone else took the credit. I told myself I was doing it for the mission. For the partnership. For the dream we built. She glanced out across the audience. Some familiar faces nodded. Some wore the faces of women who'd lived similar stories. Some simply looked stunned. I didn't realize that dream had become a cage, she said. Worse, I hadn't realized I was holding the key all along. She clicked the remote, shifting the slide behind her. It showed a timeline. Vital core, fall. Verisol, rise. Growth. Impact. Integrity. Numbers that couldn't lie, unlike those that once haunted the company's past. Claire pointed. This is not just a business turnaround. This is what it looks like when women stop shrinking themselves to fit into spaces they built. The room erupted. But Claire didn't smile yet. Because this wasn't about revenge. It was about vision. She told the audience about Verisol's new wellness platform, designed by licensed clinicians, supported by real research, accessible to communities most often priced out of healing. She told them about the scholarships Verisol was launching, the nonprofit partnerships forming, the integrity audits that would run quarterly on every department. She told them about the internal hiring process now led by an equity task force, one she chaired personally. And then she paused. Because it was time. Time to say the one thing she had never said aloud. Not in court. Not in boardrooms. Only to herself. When Ethan betrayed me, I didn't just lose a marriage. I almost lost myself. I almost believed I was what he said, replaceable, fragile, small. But here's what I know now. Her voice softened. When people underestimate you, it doesn't mean they're right. It means they're limited. She scanned the crowd, eyes steady. And the world is too broken for limited people to keep making the rules. Standing ovation. But Claire wasn't done. She stepped back from the podium and let the next speakers take the stage, her new leadership team, diverse, grounded, brilliant. She gave them the spotlight. Because that's what leaders do. After the event, Claire stood backstage, watching from the wings as Verisol's new future unfolded. Rachel joined her, handing over a glass of champagne. That was a masterclass, Rachel said. You rewrote the whole story. I didn't rewrite it, Claire replied. I just finished it. Rachel grinned. Have you checked your inbox? Claire raised an eyebrow. Rachel continued, 3 networks want to turn your story into a series. One of them already titled it, The Quiet Storm. Claire rolled her eyes. Let the ink dry first. They both laughed. Then Rachel added, more quietly, and Ethan sent another letter. Claire didn't flinch. Did you read it? Rachel nodded. Same cycle. Guilt. Enlightenment. Asking for your thoughts. A strange quote about finding peace in surrender. Claire looked toward the bright stage. Toward the future. No response, she said. Rachel tilted her head. You sure? I mean, after everything. Claire smiled. But it wasn't bitter. Just resolved. I already gave him the most powerful answer I had. Rachel blinked. My silence. Claire shook her head. No. This. She nodded toward the glowing Verisol banner. Toward the team. Toward the legacy Ethan would never touch again. Then she walked away, heels echoing across the marble floor, each step a final period on a chapter long overdue to end. Outside, a reporter tried to intercept her. Ms. Dawson. One quote. Just one. Claire paused. Looked back. And gave them 5 words. Clear. Simple. Undeniable. I built this. Without him. Then she stepped into the waiting car. And let the future drive. The magazine hit the shelves a week later. Claire Dawson, poised in charcoal and light, her arms crossed in front of the Verisoul logo, eyes focused just off camera. The headline read, "The Silent Founder No More, How Claire Dawson Turned Betrayal into a Billion-Dollar Rebirth." She didn't pose for fame. She didn't ask for recognition. But if the world was going to keep saying her name, they were finally going to get it right. The article wasn't just about Ethan. In fact, he was barely mentioned. It was about the systems she rewired. The culture she restructured. The people she elevated. And how she did it all while the world was still trying to call her a victim. But Claire had never once labeled herself that way. And now, she didn't have to explain it anymore. Still, one question kept returning, in interviews, in podcast invites, in late-night DMs from strangers. Why did she keep his name? She didn't answer it. Not at first. But then came the charity gala. Verisoul's first annual fundraiser, hosted in San Francisco's Botanical Pavilion. Hundreds of guests gathered, dressed in elegance under hanging lights and jasmine-scented air. Soft jazz floated through the glass dome. Claire stood at the edge of the balcony overlooking the crowd, clutching her champagne flute loosely in one hand. Rachel appeared beside her, eyes on the same sea of faces. "You know they're going to ask again tonight." Claire didn't need clarification. "They always do. And are you finally going to tell them?" Claire turned her gaze toward the horizon, the city glittering, the wind cool and calm. "Yes." Inside, the lights dimmed. A single spotlight circled to the center stage. A host introduced her name, and the room erupted in applause. Claire Dawson stepped up, took the microphone, and breathed in the warm hush of attention. "I want to thank all of you," she began, "for standing with us as we rebuild an industry that for too long mistook performance for purpose." More applause. "I've been asked something over and over this past year. A simple question, but one that carries weight. People want to know why I kept my last name." She let the pause stretch. "It's his name," she said. "Yes. But it's also the name on every patent we filed this year. On every grant awarded. On the bylines of every research partnership. It's the name attached to every dollar donated tonight, to therapy centers, to youth programs, to mental health access." The audience was still. Listening. "I kept it," she continued, "so that every time he hears it, he knows it doesn't belong to him anymore." A beat. Applause. Thunderous. But she hadn't finished. "I don't keep the name out of spite," she said, voice steady. "I keep it out of principle. Because sometimes, reclaiming something is more powerful than walking away from it. And because the most poetic justice isn't erasing the past. It's outgrowing it, publicly." The applause didn't stop. She stepped down from the stage as people rose to their feet, clapping, some with tears, some with admiration, all with respect. Later that night, as she changed into something more comfortable in her hotel suite, her phone buzzed. An email. No subject. No signature. She already knew who it was from. Saw the gala. Saw the speech. "You were always better at everything. I just didn't want to admit it. I hope one day you'll forgive me, ***. Claire didn't reply. She just closed the screen and turned to her bedside table, where a single framed photo stood, not of her past, not of Ethan, but of her Verisoul team at the ribbon cutting for their first therapy satellite clinic. That was her real legacy. That was the name she'd spent her life shaping. And if Ethan wanted forgiveness, he could find it elsewhere. Claire Dawson wasn't in the business of closure anymore. She was in the business of growth. Of futures. Of truth. And in every hallway she walked, in every contract she signed, in every new building she cut a ribbon for, that name echoed like a bell no one could silence. Dawson. Not his anymore. Hers. Fully. Forever. It was raining the day Claire Dawson opened the new Verisol headquarters. Not the kind of storm that ruins events, but the kind that hushes the city, a soft, misting rain that silvers every surface and quiets every sound. Inside the building, floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the glimmering city skyline, now permanently altered by what she had built. The interior smelled of fresh wood and eucalyptus. Sustainable, clean, intentional. Just like everything else she touched. The lobby filled with partners, employees, journalists, and guests. There were no banners with slogans. No portraits. No echoes of Ethan. Only the logo carved into limestone, Verisol, Truth in Wellness. Claire stood just beyond the main doors, umbrella in hand, as she waited for the last guests to arrive. She didn't have to speak today, her team would handle the talking. That was the beauty of building something lasting. It didn't need her at every corner. It had legs of its own. Still, she walked the halls slowly, past the quiet hum of glass offices and workspaces filled with people who believed in what the brand had become. She stepped into the meditation room, not adorned in crystals or incense but grounded in science-backed design and open to all. She paused at the wall etched with the names of contributors, staff, advisors. Her name was there too. Small. Not centered. Exactly how she wanted it. A young intern passed her in the hallway and hesitated, unsure whether to interrupt. "Claire," he asked gently. "There's someone at the gate asking for a visitor pass." He said he used to be part of the company. Claire tilted her head. Did he give a name? The intern hesitated. Ethan. Ethan Dawson. Silence stretched between them. Claire didn't flinch. "Tell him we're not accepting unscheduled visitors. But thank him for his interest." The intern blinked. "Are you sure?" "I mean, I can." "I'm sure," Claire said simply. The intern nodded and walked away. Claire remained still for a long moment. It wasn't anger she felt. It wasn't sadness. It was clarity. Ethan's attempt to show up wasn't for closure. It wasn't a grand gesture. It was another pattern. Another way to be remembered. But he didn't get to choose how the story ended. Claire already had. She walked back to her office, one of 3 executive suites, none marked with plaques. Inside was a minimalist space, quiet and bright, with a wide desk and a window overlooking the city. On her shelf sat a single item from the past, a photo, turned face down. Not out of spite. But because some chapters belong closed. Rachel entered without knocking, holding a folder and 2 coffees. "We hit our Q4 goals 3 months early," she said. "And the wellness grant for community schools got final approval. They want you at the launch." Claire smiled, taking one of the coffees. "Send them the team. I'll record a message. It's not about me anymore." Rachel studied her. "Do you ever think about it?" Claire looked out the window. "About what?" "If you'd said nothing. If you'd stayed quiet. If you hadn't built this." Claire exhaled softly. "I would have faded," she said. "Into the background. Into someone else's legacy. But instead." Claire turned. "I became the story." Later that night, she sat alone on the balcony of her apartment, not the penthouse, not a statement property, just a quiet place by the park where the windows opened wide and the air smelled like rain. She sipped tea. Her laptop was open to the final draft of a book proposal. Title *What he built on lies, what I rebuilt on truth. But she didn't write it for revenge. She wrote it for the women still living in silence. For those still shrinking themselves in boardrooms. For the partners hiding spreadsheets while pretending not to notice the missing money. For the quiet ones. Because Claire had once been one of them. Now, she was the reason someone else might finally speak. As she hit save, her phone buzzed again. Another email. Another journalist. Another invitation. She didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, she closed her laptop, leaned back, and let the rain tap softly against the windows. Outside, the city moved. People changed. Stories shifted. But one thing remained. Claire Dawson. Not as the wife of a man who fell. Not as a victim of betrayal. But as the woman who turned the silence of being underestimated into the loudest triumph the world had heard in years. And this? This wasn't her ending. It was only the beginning.